All right. Thanks everyone for joining this week's community meeting. Um, and we don't have too many items on the agenda today. So basically, I thought I would give an overview of some of the changes that we have planned for the flow aggregator um, in Antrea, which is our solution, right, to export flow visibility data outside of the cluster. And if there is any question or any topic that you would like to discuss, anyone would like to discuss, then we can do that afterwards. So I'm gonna start by sharing my screen. Go and yeah, I have recently filed four issues against the for the flow aggregator. Um, and basically I can give like a super quick overview of each one. Don't hesitate to interrupt if you have any questions. And I think most of those we want to do in the next release, so Antrea 2.4. The first one is to support MTLS when exporting IPFix from the flow aggregator. So today we support TLS between the MTLS between the agent and the flow aggregator for IPFix, but we don't support MTLS when exporting records outside of the cluster. So basically, the idea is to extend the flow aggregator configuration so that users can provide a client certificate to be used by the flow aggregator, as well as a CA certificate that can be used to authenticate the external IPFix collector to which the records are being exported. So the Go IPFix library already supports providing that TLS information. So essentially, it's just about exposing the configuration in the flow aggregator and then making use of those secrets when they're mounted into the flow aggregator pod. So not very technically challenging. It's just about exposing the configuration in a way that makes sense for users and consuming it in the code by passing it along to the Go IPFix library. So this is the first one, pretty straightforward, but basically it's going to enable us to secure communications between the flow aggregator and an external collector. The second one we're looking at is the ability to filter IP protocols in Flow Exporter. And that came along because today basically we support exporting everything we retrieve from contract, and contract supports like a bunch of uh, not a bunch, but a few different protocols besides TCP and UDP, and that includes ICMP and SCTP. Some external collectors may want to only receive TCP and UDP flow information. And so basically, the earlier we can drop those flows which are of no interest to the external flow collector, sorry, the better. And so we can do that at the flow exporter. As soon as we read the data from contract, we can match it against a list of protocols we want to include. And then if it doesn't match, we can just ignore the connection, essentially. Um, I think that this filtering has to be done in user space in the flow exporter code, Golang code. As far as I know, there is no way using netlink to filter based on the protocol when reading the connection from contract. So also very simple to implement. We just need to expand the flow exporter configuration um, for the entry agent, and we'll be able to just drop the protocols we don't care about. So that was the second one. I have two more, which are quite small. This one is about letting users configure the cluster ID, which we include in flow record in the aggregator. Right now, we use the cluster ID, which is read from this config map, Antrea cluster identity, and this config map is created by the Antrea controller. So some users may want to use a specific ID that in an ID space that they control. For example, the cluster ID field in the IPFix records that we export from the flow aggregator can be an arbitrary string. And so we can add yet another configuration parameter to the flow aggregator configuration so that users can provide an ID at deployment time. And this is the ID we will use when we export the flow records from Antrea. So this one is the simplest one so far. And the last one is, and this one is actually not scope for a release yet. Um, we would like to be able to scale the flow aggregator horizontally. So when the flow aggregator is running in proxy mode, the operations that it's doing are stateless. And so basically, any agent can connect to any one of those flow aggregators and just send a record data. We don't need to have all the agents sent to the same flow aggregator instance, as was the case with the default flow aggregator mode, which is called aggregate now. Because in aggregate mode, the flow aggregator is doing correlation between source and destination records. And so all the records for the same connection, whether they come from the source or the destination node, have to be sent to the same flow aggregator instance. And so practically, that means that doing horizontal scaling of the flow aggregator deployment was not practical in aggregate mode. But in proxy mode, it's definitely possible to do. The proposal is to basically update Helm chart for the flow aggregator so that in proxy mode, we can use more than one replica for the deployment, and also add the ability to configure horizontal pod auto scaling for the flow aggregator based on the CPU load for the flow aggregator. Also a pretty simple change. Um, Other upstream projects do stuff like stuff similar to this. And Helm should reject the configuration if someone tries to do multiple replicas in aggregate mode, because that's just going to create issues that may be difficult to troubleshoot. Okay, so those are the four enhancements that we're planning for the flow aggregator, possibly in this release. The first three, I think, will be in this release. The last one, I'm not sure. I just also wanted to add one more issue, which has been open for a long time. Um, I should have opened it. Oop, let me select this one too ahead of time. Nope. So it's the other one probably. No. Okay, I know what it's about. So external flow. Here we go. This one. I actually added a milestone for the release after this one. I'm gonna clear the SID because I don't think Yunteng is gonna work on this. Um, but basically, our flow aggregator today, our flow visibility solution, let's call it this way, doesn't support external two-pod traffic, which is traffic ingressing into the cluster. For example, traffic coming to a node port or load balancer service. So either it doesn't officially doesn't support it in practice, and I think a lot of those observations may not be valid anymore because I opened this issue at the end of 2023 and there's been some changes to the implementation since then. But back then, we claimed that we didn't have any support. In practice, we had some support, but the different types of flow patterns were not handled in a consistent way and in a way that made sense most of the time. And so this issue As a lot of details. As I said, not all of this may be accurate still. But it would the idea was to provide support for those flows officially, and not just flows which are internal to the cluster or flows which are leaving the cluster. Obviously, ingress flows, load balancer traffic. That's important use case. Um, and so the idea was to provide support for this. It may be important also in the case of multi-cluster, right? When you have multiple Antrea clusters and you have traffic across clusters, that could be a use case that we want to support as well. And so I think we're gonna start looking at this in the next couple of months. There's been some interest from that issue from a couple of users. And so, yeah, I think it's a good time to revisit this and see um, if we can add that type of flow as a supported type of flow. So it's probably going to be a much bigger issue than the other ones that I just described, but it's an important one functionality wise. All right, that's all for me. I think that covers it. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and if no one has any question about this, and we can also open the floor for new topics that you guys would like to discuss. All right,
Hello,
so
Louis.
oh, go ahead, Zhengsheng.
Hey, yeah, just about the auto scaling of the Proximo Pro aggregator. Do you think there is a use case? I mean, the measurements of the flow aggregator. Do you think is the cluster really will be really big to use this feature? Because if the flow aggregator in Proximo needs to be scaled up, I think the collector in the upstream, maybe it will be packed two,
It's true.
even packed two. Yeah.
Yeah, I think possibly having multiple instances of the flow aggregator is a way to spread the load across multiple compute nodes, right? The replicas can have maybe some anti-affinity so that different flow aggregators are not scheduled on the same node. Because a flow aggregator handles accumulated bandwidths of all the aggregator of all the flow exporters, right? Both on ingress and on egress. Um, so I think when the cluster becomes pretty large, it could be a good idea to be able to spread that bandwidth across multiple compute nodes. Um, Before tackling this issue, I've been meaning to do some scale testing of the flow aggregator actually to kind of like get an idea of how many flows, what kind of bandwidth it can handle in proxy mode, because we don't have that data. There's been like a lot of changes to the Go IPFix library and the flow aggregator code since I think the last scale test that we may have run, and so we don't have any accurate data. So I think we should. That's also why I didn't put a milestone for this issue because I think it's important to get that data first. Um, but I think there is value in being able to spread that load across multiple compute nodes if different replicas are scheduled across different nodes.
Yeah, understood. I think this makes sense. Even if we are not reaching to the limit, for example, CPU throughput limit of the single flag operator, we should still distribute those traffic. This is to reduce the network throughput utilization of a single flag operator. So this avoids interfere with normal workload traffic.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, thanks for your question, Zhengsheng. And as Salvatore would say, going once, going twice, and going three times. So thanks everyone for joining, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks with the regular host, the entertaining host.
Thank you, and
Thank you.
Yeah. Have a good
thank you.
day or have a
Bye.
good night. Bye.
Bye.